Prophet of God by Chris Cooper, Chapter 2. Honey, Trevin could hear his mom's agitated voice pinball up the stairs from below. He lay still, examining the pillowscape with one opened eye, not yet ready to gather the air to respond to her. Now his dad's command broke from beneath the plush cream carpet floor. Trevin sat up partially, his hair falling across his puffy face. Yes? He knew his parents wouldn't bring themselves to attempt dialogue over such a distance. He could see them standing there in the glossy marble vestibule without even looking, them dressed up, furiously taking note of their digital wristwatches. Trevin rose and cracked his toes along the swollen carpeting on the top of the landing which overlooked the main hallway leading into the foyer. Quickly, his dad's balding head appeared below, just beneath the ornamental cast iron railing which stretched across the upper level of his bedroom. Honey, Trevin's mom said again, we're heading out for the conference. Jen's gonna be by in a couple hours to walk Oscar. Anyway, why aren't you up yet? Trevin's mom contorted her makeup-covered face, examining her son in his loose white tee and briefs. Son, his dad sighed, is that testimony written up yet? Trevin rubbed his stiff neck. Get it done, not tomorrow, today. His dad clenched his car keys into a fist. I'm not wasting time meeting with the diocese again. This isn't cheap. With that, the two passed underneath and out the front French doors, parting with just a shutter and clamp behind. Love you too, Trevin said under his breath. In the bedroom, Trevin popped open a drawer filled with rolled up towels, just staring down at the white mass before reaching into the slate stone-faced shower to turn it on. He glanced into one of the two mirrors mounted across the broad wall. You're not gonna have to fucking worry about it, Dad, he whispered to himself, staring at his own naked body. Trevin took a shower and gathered his things and got dressed. He unfolded a series of papers inside his bedroom, of which he had written some couple hundred words, just the beginning of a, quote, testimony of faith, which was part of an application package he was supposed to submit to the private Catholic college he was to attend in the coming autumn. He had since determined he would indeed write a testimony, but that it wouldn't have anything to do with religion. His enrollment was all but guaranteed, with his father's deeply curated ties with the Universal Church and all. The testimony was a droning formality. He shook his head, only lightly tracing the indents of every paragraph, before casting the sheets, just as well blank as filled, aside. Shoving his car keys into one of his pockets, he peered into the bright bathroom with its fan still humming along and the towel drawer still hanging open. He waddled in, and beneath the crisp, white, rolled-up towels the maids had so neatly arranged, he revealed a compact, matte black 9mm pistol, its dark body contrasting with its cotton nest he'd made for it a little while back. It hadn't taken much to acquire the gun. Just some guy on an internet hub he'd found calling himself Frosty the Snowman had sold it to him real cheap. Trevin examined the chunk of carbon material and steel in his hand and pressed the release in order to free the cold magazine. He'd stored the gun with a tattered small cardboard box packed with ammunition and unfolded its sides, finding himself trembling a little. The glint of the brass shell of each round and the copper head was almost pretty in the glint of the bright white lights of the bathroom. His eyes fell down the mouth of the barrel of the unloaded gun. and at some level he imagined it as a tiny dark window, and one which would mean his greatest escape. He thought about how one sudden thing could make absolutely nothing else matter. He began to marvel a little. Just a blink, he thought, or even less time, and every single dread would vaporize instantly. Every single day he had no stomach to live, to fight, he reasoned. Ahead, gone. One moment to end all the moments throughout his life. And all this power simply resting in the palm of his hand, not much more than the weight of a stone. That which was facing him, he wouldn't have to face. He could just leave. How he'd have loved to skip the whole thing. The weight, the yoke of it all, the fake smiles and congratulations, the disingenuous cliche of the speeches and the sure-to-be prestigious graduation ceremony one day. All that expectation suddenly up in smoke, at his will, on his time, and not on theirs. Trevin's fright and regret and his silence bared down the reasoning of his otherwise sober mind, as a crushing weight bears down on the earth. To him, life had convinced him of its merely dismal prospect at best, and the incessant fakery, the feeling of disassociation with whoever everyone thought he was, expected him to be, expected him not to be, seemed too much a contradiction to bear. He took up the magazine and fastened one of the hollow point rounds between his fingernails, pushing it down into the strong, fresh spring of the loading chamber. He couldn't secure the bullet in. He pressed and pressed, surging all his strength against the brutal full metal jacket's surface, until a single bullet finally popped in with a tiny clang. He sighed and nodded. He'd only need one anyway. But not here. He wanted to go somewhere they'd have to look for him. That for once those who supposedly care so much for him would have to put in the effort to find him, as they'd done so little, he reasoned, to find him in life. Maybe they'd at least bother to look for him dead. The place had to be somewhere traceable but still remote. You now come to me, his mind folded with his brows. Trevin recalled that his older brother, Benjamin, who'd since moved away, used to like hanging around this place he'd always called Luke's. Trevin was under the impression that Luke's was either a friend of his brother or maybe a bar or a club for the longest time, but his brother had since said it was a forest, and in many ways he'd lauded, a sanctuary where one could, quote, lose time and lose yourself. Exactly who and what Trevin was convinced he wanted to lose. After searching online, he had found the directions and was setting out to discover Luke's for himself. His older brother had also left Trevin his old off-road all-wheeler, still in decent shape, the sturdy retro frame covered in colorful bumper stickers of various tourist spots and indie bands. The engine came to life along the crisp, luminous concrete driveway, which fed into Trevin's parents' multi-car garage. His dad had specifically denied the somewhat musty all-wheeler to rest inside during the warm season. Trevin looked around the front yard, cozily manicured, and spotted one of the gardeners raking circles around some rose bushes. This guy always had a wide smile across his sun-kissed face, and expectedly he waved Trevin's way, lifting a straw hat above his brow. The sunlight of a pretty day winked through the tall Spartan cypress trees which lined the property. Trevin feigned a smile, waving back to the clueless gardener, whom he'd seen so much but never had the time, or maybe the inclination, to actually know the name of. The gardeners were usually timid, but when this man began approaching Trevin's truck, he began to feel a bit of irritation crawl up his own neck. He was an older man, The skin on his face was tan and folded like quality leather in what must have been decades working outdoors. He had broad, inviting cheekbones set over a smile of broken teeth. "Hello," the gardener trekked across the yard, firing up a glove into the air cheerfully. "Hey," Trevin rolled down his window, feigning a smile. "Hello," the gardener said again. "How are you, Mr. Bauer?" He smiled. "Doing good, yeah," said Trevin. "What's up?" "Oh, nothing. I was just working on your roses. Your mother mentioned she might want that front mulch bed replaced with beach stone. Did you hear anything about that?" Trevin glanced back and forth. No, sir. I mean, she hasn't said anything about that to me. I guess something like that probably wouldn't matter to her, really." Ah. The gardener leaned on the shaft of his rake, flicking the lip of his hat. The two strangers shared that space left where conversations go to die for a moment. The gardener looked around the big property. His glance bounced over the tops of the cypress trees as they danced in the oncoming breeze. A driving wind rolled in brilliant smells of blooming pink lilac some distance away. "You know," the gardener drew out of nothing, almost delaying, "it's such a nice day." Trevin nodded, just bearing down on the steering wheel with his hands. "Yeah." "I think we're going to have a mild summer," the gardener observed. "Oh yeah? What makes you think so?" The gardener smirked, eyes still set across the yard. "The trees, they tell me so." Trevin snorted, quickly drawing back an actual laugh with a sorry and a swipe of his nose. "You are religious, no? You have faith?" asked the gardener. Trevin oscillated his eyes. I mean, my parents are Catholic, and I've been going to Mass since I could remember. I mean, mostly on holidays and stuff, you know." "I see," said the gardener. "Sometimes I think it's not in the craziness, the noises of life that we hear God speak, but in the small moments, the quietness, you know?" "Yeah." Trevin's knee began shaking as he wondered what kind of sermon he'd have to endure from this rando. He silently began just driving off before. "Like these trees," the gardener painted the horizon with his glove. "The breeze moving through them. If you listen, and I mean really listen, I think you can hear God speaking sometimes. Call me crazy, but the holiest things are said in small moments by small sounds, like the breeze or a rolling brook, I think. When we ignore the noise and just listen, and we find it's not that God doesn't speak to us, but that we're not listening. It's not that we're alone, but that we're not looking. That someone quite big, is always here and now." The gardener turned to look Trevin in the eyes, concluding his speech. "But," he drew the rake up with his hand suddenly, "I don't know. I read that somewhere, I think. Maybe I'm just crazy, huh? What do I know, anyway? I hope you have a fine day, young man. If you get a chance to talk to your mom, would you mind asking her to speak with us about those beach stones?" "Sure," Trevin snapped, and drew the shift down. The drive to Luke's made for a long inner dialogue, with only the voice of the GPS for company. Trevin felt absolutely trapped. It seemed like those in his life had created a person they thought they knew, or would rather have known, and assigned Trevin with his character he had to constantly keep up with. Like lying and then having to feed the lie continually. Trevin felt he was running out of food for his overgrown deceit, forced upon him in the first place. He had his life planned out for him. After graduation, his seat at one of the most renowned private colleges in Upper Michigan was waiting for him. Room and board, all on Dad's bill. He was to take his courses and pass them with flying colors, of course, and then he'd have a comfy job waiting for him in the city. Along the way, he was to find a nice Catholic girl, court, and then marry under the Blessed Sacrament, followed shortly after by her pregnancy. He was to put a down payment on a neighborhood house with a long, luminous concrete driveway and a tall roof, and then purchase a Labrador Retriever for his upcoming children to grow up with. He was then expected to host a backyard barbecue, turning smoked chicken on his flagstone patio and talking about the game with his aging father. He was to thank him for all he'd done for him and all that he'd done in order to get him where he was, as a prince might grovel to his patron and king. For Trevin's own son or daughter one day, he'd find a nice Catholic school and make it so their little colored chair was waiting for them in the classroom on their first day. Finally, Trevin would wait till the day when his kid's voice would offer him not dissimilar praise he'd offered his own father, making it a point to do so in front of gawking relatives of various aromas. Standing on their backyard flagstone patio, surrounded by perfectly trimmed hedges of buxus shrubs, his little grandchildren playing along the manicured green lawn, the new king would graciously accept the homage. Such was the height, the depth, and extent Trevin had figured he could expect from the inestimable unfolding of the God-given years ahead, still and sterile and clear as calm waters, and shallow. All set, not his waiting for life, but life waiting for him. It was a good life, but one Trevin felt he'd already lived and secretly loathed. Not at all in the sense of wanting to and had, but in the sense of already being lived by somebody else and not himself. There was no himself, he'd since concluded growing up. Just a series of expectations and their respective fulfillment. People saw Trevin, they talked at him, they even gave him things and showed their love toward or at him. But the young man gripping the cold leather shell of the steering wheel, heading for Luke's Wood, tearing down the damp road, was not Trevin, even though he shared the name. And once a life is spent, he'd reasoned to himself, what's left but to be dead? He felt himself watching his future, unamused by the witnessing of it, horrified, actually. Those parts of him that he knew and that they didn't, they couldn't, he thought, he would spare himself their reaction to his reality, unable to hold up their shell of him for years to come. He loved his family and in all that they had done for him, and in all the ways a charity case loves the charitable. That's why he wanted to spare them also having to know who he truly was, which was, as those in his life had made abundantly clear, an irredeemable type, with the single exception of forsaking all happiness perpetually, or true fulfillment and allegiance of and to the self, the one God actually made. He didn't want a house with too many rooms. He didn't want to crack his spine trying to maintain posture on an uncomfortable oak pew, spilling soulless words into the incensed air. He didn't want to live here, or even near here. He wanted the beach, the western sun at the edge of the continent, a loving husband and partner, the sea mist kissing his cheek all at once. He wanted a little dog, not a big one. He hated barbecues. He hated meat and beer and football and the Bible. He hated fake laughter. He wanted to bust a gut at a nasty, irreverent, low-budget comedy, get some ice cream on the dock, and swing himself along the shoulder of someone playing a guitar. He didn't want to give a fuck, just once. Actually, as many fucking times as he wanted to. And he wanted to get fucked, importantly, by a genuine virile love. To Trevin, in those times, there was only one solution. It would be quick, and so painful as to be painless for him, like cauterizing a tumor. It would take a while for them to get over, but they would, he'd reasoned, consoling himself. Eventually they'd find peace or have another kid to draw their expectations onto, and one they were capable of truly loving as a champion of their parental aspirations, and not as an obstacle to them. As for him, he'd rather be healed into a scar of the past than to remain in his years a walking, bleeding wound and blight on his family's so-called reputation or legacy, he'd thought. Trevin parked his all-wheeler in a wide gravel circle along a long drive and brief time. A pair of worn concrete posts marked the entrance of the forest, and an old sign, barely legible, read, Lucas Biological Preserve. He pressed on, his sneakers pinching the twigs below, lying scattered across an unkempt, gravelly parking lot. Trevin at last approached a clearing and opened up to the white towel he'd been carrying. He unleashed the magazine from the handle just to be sure the bullet he'd managed to place in there was secure. Despite the mild temperature, it seemed to be cold. Some taller trees around him were busy with birds hopping around in conversation. Trevin examined the pistol and his heart began to race. He tried to keep up with his breath and his vision became steadily blurry. He knew he needed some help getting to the other side of this task. So he reached into his pocket to reveal an orange pill bottle with a white cap. Trevin's older brother had associations unbeknownst to his parents, but kept between them. He often talked with Trevin about how some of the things he had done felt, and he'd been Trevin's first experience with marijuana. These things, these tabs, were different though, so he was told, or rather warned. Small tablets bounced inside the bottle, almost a butter yellow. He didn't know exactly what they were or where they came from, but leaving them as a parting gift before setting out to school, his brother had boasted how good the stuff was. He was left him with a caution to not take too many at once, or even less than a single one would do. The pills he left with a friendly enough sounding name. Sun Essence, his brother had dubbed them. Trevin had figured he'd bring them just in case his better judgment got the best of him. He popped open the bottle and placed the tab on his tongue, holding it there. He thought a minute, and then frantically popped another tab onto his reeling tongue. No drink. He shook his head at himself. Fucking figures. He rolled his eyes. The stunningly bitter taste began to swell inside his mouth. His body began to shake, so he got on his knees for stability. He'd never fired a gun before, but he knew how loud they must be. He spit out the partially dissolved pills onto the ground. Its residue began eating the inside of his mouth, and he felt like gagging. He coughed furiously, sending strands of saliva. Frustrated, he drew the gun up to his temple, whose metal tip felt brutal, bruising. He closed his eyes. His index finger shivered, stroking the stiff trigger. His stomach began to expand, and tears soon filled his eyes, and his nose began to run. It felt like something was climbing up his throat. All of a sudden, a gust of wind tossed around some dead leaves, and Trevin's eyes wandered up the trunks of the trees ahead, distorted by his watery eyes. Set against the sky of liberal blue, the tops of some maples shimmered in the sun, drawing circles with the air around them. Tiny buds of light green set against the apparent infinity and grace of the open sky. The seething blue, which has no depth, only into which all the biggest and darkest clouds could fit. The capacity to be filled with all things, to yield to the viewer whatever they wanted to see when they looked, to infinitely receive whatever they asked. Trevin was captured with the glimpse of the trees looking down at him, almost as much as he was looking at them. They were celebrating, it seemed, not in reference to him, although inviting him, but celebrating in spite of him, swept up in the rhythm of the air. The breeze whispered through the branches and poured down over his face. The cold steel of the barrel pressed against his head. His tears began to become dried. Trevin's left hand covered his ear and his abdomen collapsed. The leaves underneath him vibrated with his heavy breathing. He began to wail and moan. He'd forgotten to cock the gun. His eyes burst open. He sighed and sniffled. Jesus, he thought, and then pulled the top of the pistol to reveal the chamber, letting it snap back, returning swiftly to his hunched position. This was it. He buried his face into his elbow and began to weep, saliva drawing out from beneath his lips. Stop thinking, he thought. Just then, some yards ahead, came a voice like the slow rumble of thunder. Son! Trevin's eyes popped open again, and he lifted his head. His frantically turning sight finally landed on some brush ahead, and he saw the beard of a man shouting his way, waving a hand. He didn't know what to do. He just froze, his heart rate beating enough through the sides of his head. The gun was still buried into Trevin's head as the old man began to approach, the shrubs bowing before his tracks. The man delicately drew his legs over some lying vines and thistles coming toward Trevin's position. He revealed a walking stick he was leaning on and a brown leather satchel flung over his abdomen. A peculiarly clean sash was draped over one of his shoulders, white as snow, and mindfully decorated with varying designs of azure blue. It's okay, the old man said softly, drawing even closer. I don't mean you any harm. He spoke with an outstretched hand as he waddled toward Trevin cautiously. Trevin's swollen face was fixed, glaring at the oncoming stranger. Just lower it. It's okay. I don't... Trevin's voice finally cracked. I don't know what I'm doing, he blubbered. Son, none of us do, but it's okay. It'll be okay. The old man's graying brows arched over his sunken, gleaming eyes. Who are you? What do you want? Trevin barked suddenly. Kid, get that thing away from your head first, the man said sternly. Trevin loosened his grip and the pistol slid down his cheek. Between them for a few moments was only the rustling of the woods. I'm sorry. I thought I was alone, Trevin choked. Clearly, said the old man, rolling his eyes, trying to avoid getting caught in some thorny brush near his own leg. I don't know what to say, sir, Trevin speaked. What's going on? The old man's voice loosened with warm concern. Trevin stiffened his neck. Nothing. Who are you, and what do you want? Trevin found himself nearly puffing up his chest. The old man took a few more steps forward. Don't. Just stay back, ordered Trevin. Listen, why don't you just set the gun on the ground, okay? You'll be okay. Everything's okay here. You're safe here. As if Trevin just realized where he was and what he was doing, he let the pistol slip from underneath his hand. and it made a thud against the forest floor. "Do you want to come with me? I've got some drinks this way. You look thirsty, bud." Trevin thought to himself, "This is insane." He was sure this random old man was probably a serial killer. He'd seen enough true crime shows to know how it begins. Surely he was trying to lure him. Trevin quickly recollected his pistol from the ground. The old man took a step back from his shivering glance. "Do you even know how to use that thing?" "I know enough," said Trevin. "I need to go." He rose, dead leaves falling from his knees. Trevin looked over at the old man. "I can't leave you, are you kidding me?" the stranger spoke up. "What do you mean?" Sweat pores opened around the 9mm handle in Trevin's palm. "Do you know how often people miss the shot?" the old man asked. "What are you talking about?" "Many people don't even realize it's actually very hard to shoot yourself. You could miss." The old guy almost chuckled at himself. What? "When you're all nerved up and your muscles twitch, so even if the gun's right here," the old man mimicked a gun to his own head with his bony fingers, "you could still slip at the last minute, and next thing you know, you're still alive except with half a freaking head in the ICU. Trevin tished. "Have you used a firearm before?" "No." "Could you do me a favor? Do you see that tree trunk over there?" The old man lifted his thin arm toward the woods beyond. "Yeah?" "Shoot it. Just give it a try. See if you can land a shot. If you can do that, then I'll leave you alone to your business, okay?" There was a wide trunk some 10 yards from where Trevin was standing, marked out by deer scores. "Go ahead, just aim low." The old man rested his palms together at the head of his walking stick, waiting. Trevin turned and lifted the gun up, doing his best to align the snout of the barrel to the body of the tree ahead. "Remember, boy," the old stranger instructed, "breathe, and mid-exhale, unleash." Trevin squeezed the trigger. The force of the blast ran up his arm and threw him back some. It felt like an electric shock through his funny bone, and the cracking noise tore through his ear with further agitation. Trevin didn't recollect the senses enough to notice his shot just knocked off a chunk of bark on the very edge of the tree near the base, sending a plume of dirt and wood into the air. "You see?" The old man's voice entered Trevin's mind as if emerging from the depths of water. A soft buzzing still lingered. He could barely keep the weapon up with his scrawny arm shaking. The old man turned his back to Trevin and started in the opposite direction. "All right, come with me. Let's get you some water." "What? What do you mean?" "This way." The old man pushed forward when he noticed Trevin frozen. "Hey," the old man snapped. "What are you, busy?" Yeah," Trevin said. The old man stopped in his tracks. "You were just about to throw in the towel, and now you're busy with life?" He shook his head. Trevin swallowed the lump in his throat. "What's the matter?" the stranger shrugged. "I just want to show you something." "Show me what?" "I want to give you something." Trevin looked back at the way he'd entered this space, and then around this space where he'd anticipated ending. He sat on the notion in the mind of following the stranger. Why not? He had planned on being dead by now anyway. So what if he's a serial killer? Maybe he'd do it for him. The old man turned back from some brush to face him. "But I need something from you first." There it is, thought Trevin. He knew this forest hermit must have been a predator. I need you to give me the gift of your faith," the stranger continued, smiling. Trevin's brows collapsed. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Follow me. Come on, I'll get you a drink." The old man pushed some sad foliage aside to reveal a beaten path ahead. It winded across the woods, and he turned to present it to Trevin. "This is the way." Trevin fell his gaze, proceeding forward over the lumpy floor below. He began to imagine these shrubs and twigs as the last, indeed, he'd see of the earth, as suspicion began to churn inside his stomach. The pistol, still hanging from one of his hands, became something of an anchor. He quickly reasoned that if there were any trouble ahead, he'd at least have some defense, and then it dawned on him. He'd only loaded a single bullet into the chamber earlier on, and had left the remaining bullets inside the car. The old man faced the path ahead, and Trevin found himself following behind him some distance, watching the stranger's plain white tee contort against the strap of his messenger bag as they made each step forward. The old guy could barely walk, it appeared, trudging across the curvy ground, making points to avoid the mounds created by the roots. How dangerous could he have been? There came upon the two yet another break in the thick woods. Trevin paused to observe the towering spruce trees surrounding this spot, and the old man continued ahead till he paused at one of the bases of the trees and unfurled his fledgling body onto a fallen mossy log, letting his walking stick guide him down. There was something palpably different about this spot. Trevin could feel it. A peculiar troop of hyacinth bundles spread between a couple evergreens burst into full bloom, seeming out of place. It felt like a tucked-away space, making the traffic of the woods, with the stirring of woodland rodents and leaping birds, further and further away, though not far, till drawing for the senses a displaced tranquility, against contrary reason completely. Trevin stunned himself with his own sense of unusual, abrupt calm. The old stranger appeared before him, holding what looked like a pile of sheets of paper, after shuffling through his loyal sling, in what was clearly amongst a makeshift encampment, tarps hanging from tree limbs and scattered books and bottles. Trevin's vision whirled around the place, till landing onto the stranger accompanying him, who was busying himself flipping through some bunch of letters, now puffing on a pipe. This man, though identically dressed, oddly, was not the one he'd recognized from just a few minutes prior. The old man's hair was darker, not as long and scraggly. His eyes were lifted by a broad smile. His neck and arms and posture were fuller, and his eyebrows were like dark caterpillars resting over his face as he sat, still puffing on a pipe, offering Trevin a quick, warm glance before refocusing on the object of his study. Trevin froze on account of the confusion of the man's shifting appearance, unable to keep track of his words or thoughts, and blinking repeatedly. Before he knew it, the stranger was standing not too many feet in front of him. He walked up, a pipe hanging from one lip, and handed Trevin a bottle of water to drink, ice cold, but not a cooler in sight. The man smiled and then handed him a small pile of papers. Trevin accepted the stack, and using his pistol as a surface, began scanning them. "What's this?" he spittled. "It's the way," the stranger smiled, "and you're never alone in it." Trevin flipped from page to page before presenting the series of papers into the air. "There's nothing here. I don't understand." The man drew his dark mustache to the side. Trevin kept flipping. "I'm sorry, I don't get it." To Trevin, every sheet was as blank as the last. "You can't read it?" Read what? There's nothing here, sir, Trevin insisted. The man nodded. I thought so. He went back to his spot on the log, popping open an aluminum canister nestled inside a camouflage fabric holder for a drink he'd tucked away. Look, Trevin said, I'm not sure what you're trying to do, but I've really got to go. I'm sorry. The man let out a grunt and adjusted one of the suspender straps hugging his shoulder. Sure, he said. The real fiction is easy to read, but the reality never is. Anyway, will you keep yourself safe, kid, or do I have to get some help? Trevin blushed. I didn't mean... He wiped his nose across his wrist. I mean, I feel like I don't have a choice, all right? I just can't do this anymore. And you think killing yourself is going to give you an out? The man caught Trevin's glance with his own. You, as of now, have many choices ahead, son. You don't need to settle for the shit the world throws at you. You truly will always have a choice. That is your untouchable power. Or gift, I ought to say. What do you mean? Yeah, it's easy to say so, Trevin shook his head. Killing yourself isn't a solution, kid. That thing you're trying to run from, whatever it is, that thing you don't want to do or that thing you just want to stop, ending your body does not equal peace, not the kind you're looking for. You're just picking to not have any more choices left by going straight to the last one. It's a lot more than that. It's not so simple. The stranger sighed. You think where you're looking for help from is simpler? No, I mean, it's complicated. It's just complicated. When we die, we face the truth of all things. We're given to the crossroads. In order to become, to be begotten, to continue. We have to face our Maker here and now, or... Look, I've had enough with religion, Trevin said. I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm just tired. Son, do you forsake the campfire that unthaws your frozen hands, or cooks your meal because you once saw it burn a nice tree? What I mean is, religion is the effulgence of faith. Sorry, the attempt of faith, not faith itself. Let's not confuse these. Religion will always suck, as much as those professing it. The man detected his drone. Look, it doesn't matter anyway. What I want to say is, whatever it is that makes you want to leave here, to leave everyone you know and love and who loves you, isn't worth it. It's beyond not worth it. You are the gem of the universe. The world is crowned with you in it, and you should shut up or learn to ignore whatever whispers to you the bad things, the man declared. And don't worry, this will stop one day. All the bullshit of this world, your life, your parents, money, whatever trouble, it all stops. You can be sure of that. Everything will go back to the garden. That's inevitable. So why help the inevitable along? What brought you here will return you home. From whence you come, so you go. They don't need your help. Death doesn't need your help. There is more to this fight than just you. And what's more is the you you've convinced yourself you are, or have been compelled to believe you are, more importantly, the one you know you're not, wins when you hurt yourself. The true one. The one I'm seeing, not necessarily the one you're seeing. Trevin's lips quivered a bit, his attention having melted into thin air. You are not alone. You are not set against this universe. The universe is set for you. And you are more than loved by more than you could ever imagine, seen and unseen. You belong where you are. Dude, that's nice. Never mind. I don't even know you. I'm sorry. It's just Trevin's word fell out of his hanging mouth. What's your poison? The man asked, shifting his tone, snapping his finger. What? Dope? Booze? What? You just dropped the book and you didn't even react. And you're drooling, son. Trevin looked down at his feet, and spread over the pine needles were dozens of bright sheets of paper he'd just let go, their countenance vibrating and pulsing. Listen. I know you'll be able to hear me after you fall, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to keep talking to you, okay? We'll get you to the hospital, bud, okay? The stranger got up from sitting on his log and started toward Trevin. The next thing he knew, Trevin felt his chest expand against the cool of the earth. A horizon of forest debris filled the sight of one of his bobbling eyes. You need to tell me what you took, okay? The man's voice floated over Trevin's lying body. You're gonna be fine, just hang in there, pal. Tell me what you took. Show me. Trevin's arm slid along his side, which was becoming gradually numb, and he felt for the inside of one of his pockets. A pill bottle rolled onto the ground from out beneath his fingers. A pair of feet smushed the ground around him, and the bottle ascended. Shit, yeah, it's sunshine, all right, the stranger mumbled. I don't know, he must have picked it up from a dealer or something. The pebbles around Trevin began to crunch with a second pair of shoes. He was frozen, while every one of his limbs were tingling, and a smothering air wrapped itself around his exposed skin. I don't know, the stranger's voice sounded again, as if answering someone else. Some kid, he just wandered in from somewhere. The stranger's voice began melting into incoherence. Every word became the next. Trevin could barely make images through what seemed closing lenses on a camera from his declining eyes. He noticed a small, woolly caterpillar galloping its way closer to his face, surmounting what must have to it seemed large leaves. The caterpillar surged its black and yellow back, striped body upward, and its tiny legs dangled in the air. Trevin smiled as much as he could, his cheek against the cold earth. Can you see me? Said the caterpillar. Said the caterpillar. Of course I can see you, Trevin mumbled, pools of drool flowing from his cheek. You're so beautiful, enchanted. Trevin then saw the whole world shrink from beneath him, drifting away and being swallowed by obscurity. His sight darkened rapidly as he just felt his stomach press over another body. He began to bounce away and nodding off. Suddenly, Trevin snapped awake. He was sitting in the passenger seat of his all-wheeler somehow. His spine shot with pain as he threw himself out of his slouch and groaned, looking through the car windows at his surroundings. He was back home, simply parked where he'd begun. The two soft lights at either side of his parents' multi-car garage shone against the surrounding darkness, bustling with gnats. It appeared to be well into the night. He clasped his hands over his face, darting his eyes from left to right, and then began feeling around himself, his pockets and shirt. On top of the dashboard, he took brief notice of a stack of papers rolled up into a burrito shape, tucked beneath the windshield. The, quote, testimony of faith he'd compiled earlier, he figured, wasn't important. The ambient noise of swamp peepers poured into his ears as he dizzily fumbled with the car's door for release, finally gaining solid ground onto the concrete driveway enough to bear down on his own knees and wipe the strands of hair from off his forehead. For a moment, he'd forgotten when his parents had left earlier. They had said would be gone a couple of days, and he gave a sudden sigh of relief, having the house to himself for a while. The dread of explanation was lifted. Trevin clasped his hands over his mouth, trying to process in his mind what had happened, when he heard some commotion round about the cul-de-sac, bouncing across the lawn and sprinkler system. Curious, he made a short walk to see what it was. Just some neighborhood guys out late, walking over each other into a sedan, clearly inebriated, one or two hooting and making banter, not an atypical scene. Trevin traced back toward the entrance of his house, exhausted.